I kind of wanted to open it up to you guys here because I remember working in sales. It was my first full-time gig, and I just remember that feeling of like going into a full-time gig for the first time, and just that realization that your free time is gone in a way, or it's not what it once was.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like I just remember, I remember because for training, like the actual sales floor was this big Wolf of Wall Street type floor with these big, beautiful windows at the back that let lots and lots of sunlight in. But at first, when we were in training for like the first week, they stuck us in this like hole in the wall office in the middle of the building with nothing but these bright white fluorescent lights. And I just remember sitting there and man, you just look at the clock and you're like, all I had worked before this were part-time jobs or just gone to school.
Mhm.
And in college, like at least at film school, like, we had schoolwork, we had assignments, we had shit we were doing, but we had a lot of free time too.
Yeah.
And I just remember
No
sitting there
doubt.
like, holy shit. I couldn't believe. I'm like, because, going into it, I'm like, well, that's not that bad. Like a 9 to 5, or in this, in this case, 8 to 5 with an hour lunch.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, that's not that bad. You just go in and it's part of the morning, or most of the afternoon, and then you're done. But it's like, man, you don't realize how big of a chunk that is out of your day until you've lived it, like and I remember sitting there like after a few days and looking at that clock and just being like, man, it's only 11. And I got how many more fucking hours of this shit? Oh my God. And then I started, and then you start thinking like, well, at that time, I'm still thinking in school terms, where I'm like, okay, well, summer vacation's coming up. And then I'm like, wait, no, there's no fucking summer vacation. And then I'm like thinking about Christmas and I'm like, well, there's no Christmas break. And I'm like, holy shit. I just remember that feeling dawning on me of like, oh my God, this is life. I can't fucking believe this.
I had such a different experience, but like scary in a different way. So I'll go ahead and share. So I did not have this like 9 to 5 grind. Like I went to school for engineering and I went to a very big company for a telecom analyst position. And I did it, some work there during undergrad as an intern and then transferred over to there full time, and remember being like, having it in my head, like, okay, once I go full time, they're going to train me and sit me down. I'm going to go through the classes. I'm going to learn more about like what this stuff is. I'll really get into the weeds of it. Like I have an idea of what I'm going to be working on. And then day one of starting, it's like, it literally was just like a continuation of my internship. I didn't get any training other than, like, basically, being like, ask this guy if you need help with anything. And then I'd ask him and he'd be like, send me a link and be like, here it is, go do it. and in my internship, I worked like 40 hours a week during the summer. And then over the course of the senior year, I worked like 10 hours remotely per week and got a nice little paycheck but there was never really that much work. And I was like, all right, once I get full time, they're going to start giving me stuff. I'm going to start getting involved. I'm going to get trained. I'm going to start learning. And then I was like, none of that's happening. And then I was put on a project that I, wasn't informed I was going to be on. And then just kind of like, they're like, oh, it's going to get so busy in this job position. You're going to get trained up and learn what to do by shadowing this guy. And then, it never got that busy. And I've just kind of been meandering there and just feel like, my stress not coming from like the burnout, but being like, I'm surrounded by people who have been at this company for 40 years. Like people are, like every month they're like, so and so is 30 years, 35
Oh,
years, 26 years. Keep going, you've got it. And they're like sitting at the desk next to me, and I'm
oh
like,
no.
dude, if I like there's no way, like I'm not sure, like if I can't find something else to get out of into something else, I'm going to be stuck here for 25 years, 30 years. And like I'm just going to be like sitting around and just kind of like doing this mediocre ass job and just like doing the bare minimum, and then I'll get my little like 3% raise at the end of the year and a little like, bonus, and like yeah, that'll be that. And I was just like, the thought of being stuck at like a big corporation until I'm 65 is like one of the scariest thoughts that you could have, especially when you're bored shitless,
Yeah.
which I have been, and which is why I'm especially not going to share what company this is. Um, but I have a light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm going to be starting a new job in June, and and I think I'm gonna have a little bit of the Jake experience where it's gonna be like, oh, this is a real job. Okay, they're gonna have me training. They're gonna have me on site. Like I'm gonna be ass in the chair working. So I'm gonna probably come and double back to film tangents and be a little more grateful for my slow job life. But it's all for the best.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
for
I mean,
go ahead.
it's yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, it was kind of I get yeah, it's kind of an inverse journey for me because like for me it was so I'll share this one. I think the best thing because here's the thing, I have no regrets about doing sales, like high pressure sales. No regrets. I'm really glad I did that because I think my experience would have been far. I think it would have been far worse if I started a job that was lower stress, but also still sitting in an office because I just think I would have had all those feelings that I described before, but also without that motivation of like, well, I can at least make a shitload of money while I'm here, you know? And I kind of learned this, this tactic, this motivation tactic when I did sales. Because you got to understand, this was outbound small to medium business telesales, cold calls. And we had to do 150 of them per day at this company that I worked at. So people would ask me like, "Oh, how many calls do you have to make? Like 10, 15?" I was like, "150, dog, is how many we have to make in 8 hours." And it was like a few hours of talk time too that they wanted. And so it's like you're fucking grinding. And I mean, it was like, dude, if you got up to take a piss, you'd come back and have a manager being like, hey, like why haven't you been on the phone for 5 minutes? Like it was like, you had to fucking be on it, dude. Like I would come in and like just pound, like caffeine, just being like, fuck, I need to, you know, you could not. I mean, dude, fuck, God forbid you went in there tired. I mean, you were screwed, dude. Um, but I learned sort of these motivational tactics that continue to help me to this day. It's something I'm going to pull a bit of a Rob Ager here and coin a term here, but it's something that I like to call motivation stacking. And what it is basically there's this whole idea, everybody talks about motivation, right? And I think a lot of times people look at it the wrong way. So I think there's two kind of extremes. One extreme is that you have to you can only work at something with motivation. Classic example. I only write when inspired, and I don't think that works. But there's also the other extreme, which is sort of this grind bro mindset of like work without motivation. But I think that's kind of a paradox because if you're working, by definition, if you're doing anything, by definition, there is some motivation, Like, even if I don't feel like going to work, there's a motivation there. And it's to not get fired, to make money, whatever it is. And so the sort of middle ground that I found when I worked in sales was basically what I would do is if I couldn't be motivated by one thing, I would try to be motivated by something else. So in sales, the main motivation obviously was to make lots of money. You know, nobody goes into sales for any other reason generally than to make more money. Otherwise, you wouldn't work in sales. Like nobody wants to work a high pressure job where you have to produce a result daily that you don't even have direct control over, you know? Like you can execute to the best of your ability and come up short. It's just the reality of things. Like sometimes it's just not going to work out on a day-to-day basis. And so nobody's going to do that without an incentive. And obviously the incentive in sales is to make lots of money. So that was the main motivation. But for me, especially at the time, I was still living at home, so I didn't have any bills or anything. And so it was all it was like I had everything to gain and nothing to lose. There was not much of like a fear aspect there. So it was kind of if I didn't make the money, it didn't matter that much. So some days I couldn't really motivate myself with money, especially when I started making money. I got complacent and it was like I don't really care about money today, you know? And so on day if I couldn't be motivated by making money, it would be like, okay, well, I'll do this with the motivation of gaining sales and persuasion skills that I can use for the rest of my life, no matter what industry I work in, no matter what situation I'm in, right? And on days that didn't motivate me, the last resort was, hey, my motivation today is to just hit the dialer, feel the pain, and know that grinding and going through the pain, the sheer suck of business owners answering the phone and cursing at you and telling them that you've called them 400 times and to stop, and understanding that going through that, it is good for you. It toughens you up. It makes you it gives you those calluses, man, those mental calluses. It makes you, it gets you hard, not in a sexual way, but like in a, it hardens you. It toughens you up, And so I don't know if you're someone out there who struggles with motivation sometimes, try that. Try not only having one motivation, try having three, like, one that's the main one and two you can fall back on. So like I use it with writing right now. The main motivation is that, hey, I love being creative, but on certain days I don't fucking feel like writing. So then the motivation might be, oh, well, I want to write, so that I can have a big old body of work, and then on days when that can't motivate me, I'm like, hey, I'm going to do this because it's fucking good for me and it's discipline. It's disciplined. It's making me more disciplined. And hey, maybe it'll make me rich one day. You know what I mean? So try that if you're someone out there who's struggling with motivation. But yeah, Edward, I think you were going to talk about your experience. I know I tangented for a little while there.
Yeah, no, for me, and I want to keep it short. For me, it was one of those things where, like you were in college, before then before college, I had experience with like working a relatively kind of full-time-ish kind of thing. Because I was working as a dishwasher before I even started college, just kind of in that period before then. And I found myself doing just like 30 plus, like almost 40 hours a week. So that was very time consuming. So I kind of understood, I came out of college kind of having an understanding of the rigorousness of it and kind of how time consuming it could be, But then after college and for like about 10 months after college, yeah, I worked in manufacturing, because like Jake said, it was, graduated right out COVID. And for me, I had like a lot of things that I had to kind of keep afloat, because I graduated and then I just moved out on my own and I had an apartment with my brother. And so he and I just kind of had, expenses and things that we had to take care of. And I went into manufacturing literally for like 9 to 10 months. I was working in manufacturing and it was literally 12 hours. So that literally,
Jeez.
that tests your ability to work and stay concentrated and task, and just ultimately just energy and muscle just working. I was working from 7 to 7. the I guess the flip side of it was that I was working 4 days, and then the next week I would work 3 days. So I still had like a relatively, it's like, oh, I had 4 days off in one week and then 3 days off in one other week. So there was like that balance of that, but still, like the days that you're there, you're like, oh my god, I'm gonna be here. You go in there and it's nighttime, and you leave there and it's nighttime. And so that I did that work, and it's interesting the thing that gets you out of certain lines of work, because I don't think necessarily, like, I didn't leave that job even out of my own volition. Like, I didn't leave that job because I was like, I want to leave this job. I was just doing the job. I needed to make money, and then I still found enough time in my free time to write or watch movies or whatever. So I was like, the job is not all consuming, but it does take days. Where it's like certain days I don't do anything but be here. And then go home and eat, sleep. Um, but I remember that the issue for me was that we made a movie with some friends of ours. Shouts out
Hmm.
to Lang and Jake, you guys know who you are, and to Aiden, who I believe, at least Lang, I think it's a long time listener of the show. Shouts out to Lang. But we went to Chicago, made a movie over a couple of weeks, and I took all my vacation that I had accumulated by that point. I was like, I'm going to take all my vacation. I'm going to go away for a few weeks. And so by the time I came back, I had no vacation. And then there was just kind of a lot of heavy stuff going on in my family at the time, where I needed to go and see my family. And so I explained it to the people I worked with. I was like, hey, I got to go and see my family. And at the time, despite the specificity of the work that I was doing, right, which was like, kind of a lot of just manual labor and a lot of kind of doing, manufacturing kind of shit, lifting boxes and packaging things. I was testing specifically cables at the time, like fiber optic cables. Despite the kind of work that I did, I've always proud myself I've always had pride in just doing a good work. It's like, if I'm gonna be here, I might as well just do a good work, and if I don't want to be here, I just leave. I've not been I've not been like a quiet quitter to kind of bring that in. I've not really been that, but I explained to these people, I was like, I gotta go. I gotta go for like a few weeks again. It's like, I know I don't have vacation, but I gotta go. And the way that they put it to me at the time was just like, well, if you go, you're quitting your job, because we're not going to just allow you to take like a leave of absence. So I was like, all right, I quit. Like, I'm
Beast.
leaving. It's like, if you guys are giving me an ultimatum on my own life and the decisions that I get to make, then I don't want to be here anymore. And so that was like the end of that. But I did that for literally, I'm pretty sure, like literally like maybe 9 to 10 months. So I left that, and then I was just not working for about a month. Because with that job, the nature of that job, they were paying us a lot of money because of the kind of job that it was, and I was also doing overtime. So I had accumulated like a decent amount of money while I was working there. So I was just like, I'm just not gonna work. I'm just gonna go and see my family and be with my family for a while, and then just kind of shuffled life a little bit. But that was interesting. Those first jobs that you do right out of college are interesting, especially like the way in which you leave those jobs. And I think I have stories about that at work, but I'm not gonna go into that now. But then that led into different kind of work for me that was very gratifying, but very not well paid, which is teaching. Whoa, the greatness of teaching.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that's a story for another day.
Yeah, I would say like, yeah, because it was an interesting it was kind of an interesting development for me, because I remember my second year in sales, like I had made a bunch of money and I was just tired. I was sick to death of, you know, I was sick to death of sales. I was so tired of it. It was killing me. And I was like, man, I was like, I got to figure out a way out of this.
Yeah.
Because I can't be in this industry for much longer at all. And I just remember, I remember at the time, there's kind of this temptation to sort of try to look for those TV jobs, which is essentially, oh, maybe I'll go back to school to be a lawyer or
Mhm.
a doctor or a psychologist
Mhm.
or I remember at one point looking up like, I was looking into like marine biology. Like, what about marine biologist? I could go back to school to be a marine biologist or a paleontologist. I love dinosaurs. And what I found with that stuff is this is my take on that, on sort of the whole like TV jobs, big dreams, and all that. I think people, I definitely think people should follow their dreams. Don't get me wrong. I totally support that. I'm pursuing a huge dream right now, which is becoming a published author. I want to be a full-time fiction author. That's a huge fucking dream, and I do not support the usage of the phrase pipe dream at all. I think it's a stupid phrase. I think you should delete it from your vocabulary. However, I will say that if you want one of those, if you have a dream or if you're really looking at one of those sexy kind of TV jobs, TV careers, right? I think you really need to be sure, you need to really love it. Like it needs to be the first thing you think about when you wake up and the last thing you think about before you go to bed. Like it's got to be something that you can't imagine doing anything else. Like for me, that's writing. Like I can't imagine not being a writer. Like I picture being, if I picture being a marine biologist, for example, the first place my mind goes is, yeah, but would that afford me time to write? That's literally the first place my mind goes. So if that's something, if you have that for something, goddamn, like go for it. But what I realized in my research of these other kind of career paths was you read about it, you start reading like people's experiences and you look into the industry and you kind of realize it's not as sexy as it seems on TV or how you imagined it. You love dinosaurs, you want to be a paleontologist. No, you probably don't, because it's a lot of sitting around dusting off femurs and just doing grunt work.
Right. And that's
you
the
love the
that's the
I was
thing.
just going to give another example real quick. You love the ocean, right? You want to be a marine biologist?
Yeah.
Well, be prepared to either be stuck in a hatchery cleaning fish poop off glass or being stuck on a freezing ass ship smelling like fish, cleaning dead fish, and again, more fish shit. You know what I mean? So, but go ahead, Edward.
No, I was going to say that's the thing, because the number one thing to understand about all that stuff is that it's work, right? Like it's work. Yeah. It's never not
and you got to pay your dues.
Exactly. And then it's the same thing about writing. I've always thought this way. I've always felt this way about writing and filmmaking, that it's work,
Yeah,
it's work, like first and foremost, right? Like it's a craft, right? The end product of the craft is the art form, right? And that's what you love. That's what a lot of people love. People love film. They will go watch movies and they go, I love this. I want to make these things, And then for a lot of people, that's kind of like the shattering thing of the work, that it's fucking work. That if you want to make
you gotta
movies,
you got to have farmer discipline.
Exactly. Like if you're gonna make a film, right, then you have to wake up, in the middle of the morning. We've made movies, like we've crewed on movies. You have to get up in the middle of the morning. You have to work 12-hour days. You have to be there the whole time. And you have to be putting in work and pushing and plugging and picking this thing up and paying attention. It's
making
work.
Decisions.
Yeah, making a shit ton of decisions. It's work, man. And that's like the thing that's not glamorous about it. But that's always been my mind frame. And I think that's really the healthy thing about it, especially what's healthy about it when you don't think about it. When you refuse to think about it, like you said, Jake, it's like some kind of pipe dream, right? And the first and foremost thing that you have to think about of it is that it's work, Like I've made short films, I've made music videos, I've made feature-length films, And in making any of those things, the number one thing for us, I've been the first assistant director of the movie that we made in Chicago, I've been the director of my own films. And it's like all of that shit is humongous, unglamorous, sweaty, stinky ass work,
Yeah.
But that's
And you have to sacrifice for it. You got to give
exactly.
up certain things.
Yeah,
You should never sacrifice. I think you should never sacrifice like your health or your relationship
for sure. Yeah,
for anything,
yeah,
but you need to sacrifice some little things,
yeah,
like there's hobbies that I sometimes would rather be doing than writing, but I just know it's going to eat up time, and I need to focus
yeah,
sometimes,
yeah,
you still got to have a loving relationship. You still got to be, you still got to work out, go to the gym, eat healthy. You got to put in time in other places, and you should go out and have fun still. You got to enjoy life.
yeah.
Like I'm not sitting in my, I don't spend my weekends like from morning till dusk till or dawn till dusk, like writing all Saturday and all Sunday. Like I
Right.
do other
Well, because
things,
then the whole
but
thing is, no work, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, right? Which is
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
that's
Indeed,
the
it
interesting
does.
thing about these kind of mediums that you have to in a way enrich yourself to be able to bring that to the work. So it's like it's not all misery, but there's parts of it that are legitimately are just kind of miserable, but that's just fucking what it
yeah,
is.
yeah,
And that's really the way to think about it. And like I think what you said is good, because it's like then people think about stuff that might not even be like film or whatever, but people think about stuff like being a lawyer, people think about stuff like being a marine biologist, and it's like all of that stuff, even more so than shit like fucking being a filmmaker. All of that stuff is very like labor intensive, and very
hmm
strenuous, especially as somebody who's witnessed people who have been had careers in those fields, and somebody who's like child of parents that have careers in those fields. It's work.
yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
speaking from somebody who's not in a creative pursuit, if you're one of those categories, you don't want to be a writer, you don't want to be an actor, you don't have this big grand dream. At the end of the day, for me, my advice to anybody in that position would be to really hone in on are your aptitudes, what are your strengths, and just that's what you need to play your cards to. If you're going to be stuck working a job, you need to put yourself in a position where you can capitalize on your strengths and the things you're best at instead of trying to grind the opposite flow.
yeah.
Yeah,
And also too, like I will say on the day job side of things, because the what I ended up realizing, right, with all this stuff is like we're talking about, which is because my realization was this. I'm looking at, like if I weren't a writer, I would probably be a psychologist. I
mm,
would almost definitely be a psychologist. Um, and I'm looking at that. I was looking at that career path, in a couple years ago when I'm like in the sales grind and I really wanted out. And I'm like, okay, this is how much school
yeah.
and
You
how
have to
much
you
fucking
have to get like
money
a master. You have to
and
get a
how,
master's for that
oh, a master's, a
PhD
PhD,
if
and
you want
it's
to be a
like how
psychiatrist.
much,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's like, and it's how many hours of internships
Hmm.
and how much of like,
It's a life decision
I
that you
forget
have
all
to
the
make.
terms,
You
but
have to make that life decision early on. It's one of those things that you have to
right.
commit to.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Well, and for me it was this. It was like, well, I'm not willing to give up writing for that,
yeah,
and I can't do this and writing. So I'm like, you got to pick a horse and ride it.
yeah,
So if my big audacious goal is already writing, then stick with writing. And so what I would say then, but I still have to have a day job. So what I would say to people who, whether you have like this big pursuit or not, with day jobs, I mean, let's say you're someone too who just kind of wants to pay their bills and you know enjoy their free time. Find something that's going to be low stress and offer you the best work life balance. Because like for sales, for me, it was just like my day to day great work life balance in sales. It's always just 40 hours, which unfortunately is like people are begging for these days. You're never working like, or not, I shouldn't say never, but at least in the sales roles I was in, it was 8 to 5. And if you were still dialing at 5:01, people would be like, your manager would be like, go home. Um, so, and for me, it was like, okay, look, like I found a job now where it's like I work from home, right? It's a salary position. So there's no enforced hours. Like you get your work done when you need to. And as long as the work's done, go nuts. If you want to go outside and go for a walk at 2, 3 in the afternoon, go for it. Nobody's bothering you. You know what I mean? So you got to find, like, you got to try to maximize your free time is what I would say. Like, if you're stuck in these day jobs and these ruts, and you just feel like life is all work, and it's like, man, first of all, I would say try to find something remote. Like, put real effort into finding remote work, because that makes a big difference. I know this is starting to go into like obvious land, Captain Obvious territory. So I'll probably slow down here and probably put a pin in this. But yeah, just figure out how to work to lower your stress and to maximize your free time. That's what I would say, because most people aren't going to get that TV job, or aren't willing to get that TV job, and don't really have like a lot of people don't have that big passion that they would bleed for, that they can't live without, and you got to enjoy life, man. Like getting up at 6:50 and sitting in rush hour traffic to get to work at 8:00, and then working in a high stress situation, and your boss makes you stay till 6 or 7. Like, I get that not everybody can up and quit, and I don't advocate for that. I never up and quit my sales jobs. But start working on an escape strategy. Find somewhere that's going to treat you better than that has more vacation time, that offers a better work-life balance. And one thing I would say, pay attention to how long people have been there. Because the current company I work for right now, when I was interviewing, everybody I talked to was like, "Oh, I've been here for 3 years. I've been here for 6 years." And I'm like, okay, like, people are happy here. Versus in sales, if you were there for 11 months, 12 a year, 12 months, you're a veteran. I mean, even like 8 months, you were a fucking veteran. So like the turnover was crazy.
Yeah, well, I've been there. I've been in those jobs.
Yeah. But hopefully that helps, man, because I really have a soft spot for people who, are just going through the motions and really feel like life is work's just kind of beating them down and feel uninspired. Because I get it. Like, most of our happy times and happy memories are going to come from outside work. Even writing, I would bleed for my craft of writing. But I got to say, when I think back on 2024, all my good memories from 2024, none of them involve sitting in front of my laptop writing. I'm thinking of when I visited my sister in New York. I'm thinking of all the hangouts I had with my girlfriend. I'm thinking of you, me, and Jack hitting the bar hopping and laughing until our fucking sides hurt. That's what I'm thinking of. So maximize that in your life. Try to find something that's going to allow you to maximize that.